Welcome to Testmo. In this video, we'll take a look at all the steps that you might want to think about as you're getting started with your Testmo instance. We'll give you a quick overview of how Testmo works, some of the key integrations that you might want to set up as you're getting your Testmo instance running, and some of the steps that you might be thinking about in terms of customizing Testmo to fit your workflow, inviting your team members, etc., as well as giving you kind of a full overview of the different ways that you can manage your manual, exploratory, and automated testing all together here in Testmo. Before we jump in and get set up with a new project, what I wanted to start with is just giving you an overview of what a project might look like once it's set up and running. So let's jump into this demo project. You can add a demo project in your own instance if you want to take a look on yourself as well. And here you can see we've already got a bunch of sample data here that's giving us a pretty clear idea of what it might look like once we have Testmo fully up and running and we've got some testing projects underway. When you jump into a project overview page, you're going to get a quick at-a-glance view of the testing progress that you've got across any milestones that you may have set up already. You can also dive in and see all of your manual test runs, the progress that your team's made there, any exploratory sessions, automation that you've been running recently and reporting to Testmo. Testmo helps unify your testing because it gives you an easy way to document all of the manual test cases that you might need to be running against your application, and also provides dedicated features for other testing modalities like exploratory sessions, and of course, test automation, which is such a key part of running efficient testing these days. With Testmo, you get an at-a-glance view of all of the different testing efforts that you're making across all of these different types of testing, so that you have a clear picture of what's the status of testing. Have we identified any critical issues? Are we ready to ship this release? Or is there anything that needs to be addressed before we can send this out to customers? So hopefully this gives you a general overview of what the structure of a project might look like once it's underway. Let's go back and let's say you're just getting started with Testmo and you want to create a new project. Projects are where the testing lives usually for a particular application. You may have, you may split up projects in your Testmo instance by team. Like if you've got different teams working on different apps, you could split it up by team. But typically we recommend that you start with one project and see how that works for you. And then you can create new projects as you need to over time. When you're setting up a project, you can select the users that you want to have access to that project at that time too, but you can also come back and take care of this later. You can also add a quick summary. So let's look at a project that I created just a little bit ago for our back office application. Let me just open the settings here. So when I created this application or this project for our back office application, I noted this is the system that we use for back-end billing and account management. I said the default role was going to be whatever our default role was. I didn't bother to add groups or users at this point just because I'm getting started. So now that I have my project set up, we can think about what is it that we want to bring into this project. So most teams that are starting to use Testmo will want to bring in test cases that they already have been using to test their application before they started using Testmo. Many teams have some system in place, even if it's just tracking in a Google Sheet or a Confluence page or a Word document. They'll often want it to be able to use some of that work that they've already done to get a head start on the testing that they're going to do in Testmo, which is very common. We have a full video about how to import test cases from CSV or Google Sheets in another video that we'll link in the description as well, but we'll give a quick overview of that right now. Let's say, for example, like here I have a list of test cases, of just example test cases that I may have already been using for my back office application. You can see I've got like what area of the application is it, just a high level description of the test case. I've assigned some level of priority. I've even gone through and added some preconditions that I would need to have before I could run the test and some steps that I might use to execute the test. This is pretty scripted testing, but this is just an example. Your team may or may not use this level of scripted testing or not just depends on the team and the level of detail that you need to get into with your testing. And you can also see here, I've got this field, this column for marking whether or not we've actually automated this test already. This is a pretty common workflow. Teams will start by writing a manual test, which clearly documents the functionality that needs to be tested. You can also link that back to requirements like in Jira or something like that, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But you may also, then it's helpful once you have written those manual requirements, that basically becomes your user story for your test script, your automated test script. So then you can mark that as automated later. That way you've got a clear documentation that this was the functionality being tested. This is a clear human readable version of that. And then you can indicate that it was automated or not. So we've got a sense of the kind of data that we might want to be importing into this instance. Let's go over to my instance. Just to prepare the instance and make sure that we're ready to import that data. So in Testmo, when we're talking about importing test cases, a good place to start, especially because this is a brand new project, I want to look at what test case templates I've already set up. Out of the box, Testmo comes with 2 test case templates, and one of them is enabled by default. It's this case text template. You can see here, it's got fields like priority, description, and expected results by default. And then we can also see the other default test case template that we have out of the box is the test case steps template, which gives you these structured steps. So we can take a quick look at what that might look like. Let's head back over to our project. Let's go into the repository and let's just get us a quick idea of what that might look like once we actually import the test cases. So here you can see I've got the test case text template selected. I can add a name. Here's that description field and the expected field like we saw. We've got the priority. You can see there are a number of other fields that are appearing on this test case that weren't initially referenced in the template. That's because there are some fields that are used system-wide, not just in test case templates, that becomes helpful to start to link together various test artifacts, things like tags or linking to issues, things like that, like the state of the test artifact, whether it's active, draft, and review, rejected, etc. Give you some workflow capabilities with your test cases as well. Let's just take a quick look at how that differs from the test case steps template. So here we can see the test case steps template gives us the ability to add structured steps, kind of like what we had in our Google Sheet. So now we can see how I might be able to draft this out if I was writing the test cases new. But hopefully this now gives you a sense of what the default test case templates look like. You can, of course, customize these. That's one of the beauties of Testmo is we try to give you just enough to get started, but also quite a bit of flexibility to adapt to your workflows once you get underway and you really have a sense of what you need. But let's go back here for now. I'm most likely going to use the test case steps template when I'm importing these, just because I have these structured steps. I've taken the time to do that. That said, there's a couple of fields that I'll probably need to create in my Testmo instance before I can import these, like preconditions. So let's add that, preconditions. Going to give it an automatic name for the system name. This is going to be a text. Let's add this hint. True before you can start testing. And then I'm going to select which projects have access to this field. I'm just going to say all the projects. I want this field to be something that all the projects can use. You may have certain fields that are specific to certain projects and not others. So that's where this setting can be helpful, and it's enabled. So let's go ahead and add that field. And then let me just double check the warning. I forgot to assign it to a template. Great. Let's go and assign it to my steps template because I know that I'm going to be importing that. And then lastly, we wanted automated. That can be just a checkbox. if we've automated this test again. For their space shuttle, we're probably not going to automate very much. So let's just select that this field is applicable to the back office application. And then again, we'll go back to test case steps. I could have done this all at once, but let me just... Okay, now we got automated, checkbox, save template. Okay, great. All right, so I think that's all we need in terms of preparing for the import. So now let's go back to our back office application. We'll go to our test repository. And here you can see we've got the import from CSV option. Let's just go ahead and take a quick look at this since a lot of teams are going to be using this. So I've downloaded the Google Sheet we looked at earlier to CSV. So let me pull that in here. We saw in the CSV earlier, we've got this area. This is how we were grouping test cases in our Google Sheet. This will map pretty well to folders in Testmo. So let's add test cases and new folders. Let's check the options here. We did have column names. The UTF-8 is the file encoding for Google Sheets, which is great. If we're importing from a different system, there may be some other file encoding that you would be using. So that just gives you flexibility there. And if you remember when we were setting up our templates, we said we wanted to use the test case steps template. So we'll select that there. And since we already have these structured test cases that have steps across multiple rows, we'll go ahead and select a test case can span multiple rows. All right, so the area column, we said that was going to map pretty nicely to folders. That's how we'll organize our test cases in our repository. The test case description gives a good name. We can add priority. We can add preconditions. We've got steps and automated. The folder name is a plain text. The priority, let's do high, and we'll map any priorities that we had set as medium to normal. We could change that later if we wanted to. And then if it's automated, we want the yes is to yes. So now we can just get a quick preview of what this might look like in Testmo to check if there's any issues. Everything looks like I've got preconditions coming in here too. Great. Okay, let's import. Awesome. So now you can see we've got 4 different areas in our application, each with their test cases. And we can see the cases that we imported. Looks like the priorities coming in. Let's just adjust the columns real quick so we can see that automated field. Awesome. And then we'll just take a quick look at one of these test cases in particular. So by default in Testmo, when you're looking at test cases in the repository, you get this 3-pane view so that you have a high-level overview of the organization of your test cases. You can look at the test cases that are in that same folder, and you can see the test case itself. If you wanted to look just at the test case, you can click here on the right, and that way you can focus in on the test case itself. You can edit the test case if you needed to. That pulls up your dialog window, which you can go full screen if you really need this space, or you can have as a little bit smaller just to have a little bit more context. So let's cancel that for now. We'll open up the 3-pane view again. All right, so we've got our test cases imported. That's a great start. We're building on the work that we've already done in testing before. A couple other things that you might want to do before you actually get started with some testing. Let's take a look at integrating with an issue tracker. This is a very common thing that teams will want to do. In Testmo, you can link any requirements or user stories that you've developed that you're testing against. That can be really helpful for traceability and measuring test coverage. You can also use issue tracker links to speed up the reporting of any issues that you found during testing and link to defects. So we'll look at a couple sample workflows for that. But to start, let's go ahead and actually set up the integration. A very common tool that people use Testmo with is Jira, kind of an industry standard for issue tracking. We also support a number of other issue tracker integrations. We've got integrations with GitHub issues and GitLab issues as well out of the box. Plus, you can integrate literally with any issue tracker out there, like Asana, ClickUp, Linear, Trello, Monday.com, UTrack, as just some examples, but even custom in-house issue trackers, as long as you have a link that you can put to the issue that's accessible via the web. So we won't go into that detail today, but let's go ahead and look at configuring an integration with Jira. Testmo supports integrating with multiple Jira instances. In this case, we're going to integrate with my getting started with Testmo Jira instance. So let me go ahead and grab that URL, pop back over here. Then Testmo is going to prompt us to install the Testmo Marketplace app in our getting started with Testmo instance. All that looks good. We'll tell you when your app has been added. Great. Has been successfully installed. All right, so let's go back here. Now that we've installed the app, we'll just want to register with Testmo, and it's just going to prompt us in a third window to confirm that we actually want to install. We're seeing success. We can always test the connection. Found Jira instance, found 2 projects for the Jira instance. Great. All right, so now that we've got this connection, the getting started with instance, let's take a look. We've got 2 different projects in our Jira instance, and the one that we want to actually use this integration for is the back office one. And it's going to be available to all Testmo projects. Actually, let's change that. Let's make it only available. So we only want to use this particular Jira instance with the back office project if we're using our back office Testmo project as well. Testmo also supports integrations with Jira Server or Data Center. If you're using that, you'll just use the custom link-based integration with your Jira Data Center URL. Again, it has to be accessible to the internet if you'd like that ability to click between both applications. But most teams that are using Testmo use our Jira Cloud integration pretty seamlessly. All right, so you've got Jira integrated now. We'll take a look at that workflow in just a little bit. The last thing that I want to mention is maybe a setup step is automation. So most teams will use Testmo with their test automation. There's a variety of ways that you can do that. The most basic way is to use the Testmo CLI integrated with your build pipelines so that you can report any test automation that's coming from your build pipelines into Testmo automatically, and then be able to get an at-a-glance view at all of the progress and issues that you're discovering during testing. You can also use Testmo with any test automation that you have running locally. You can do some custom configuration by submitting test automation results via the API, but the CLI is really the most common way that we see teams doing this. So we support a number of integrations across a number of systems. Today, let's look at connecting Testmo with GitHub. So I've got a GitHub repository here. In this GitHub repository, I have just a sample Playwright test set up. And I'm using GitHub workflows to run those tests with Playwright. If I look at the YAML file for my Playwright test, you can see there's a couple different ways that I can trigger this test. And the key thing here is that we've just added a couple steps to our YAML file that allow us to reference some Testmo details like our URL and token, which I've already set up in the secrets for this repository. And then if we look at the test that we wrote, let's just take a quick look at this test. You can see what the test is going to do. And then you can also see, let's just take a quick look. We've set up the test reporter to be delivering a JUnit results XML file. That's the way that the Testmo CLI will actually be able to ingest the results from your test. The JUnit reporter is something that's available in almost every test automation framework. It's kind of become this industry standard for how you can port results from one automation tool to another tool. So you just make sure that that is enabled in your test automation run. We've got a couple other files here that were part of the setup, but nothing else that we need to look at for right now. The main point is that we are installing the Testmo CLI with dependencies as part of our test run, and that we are running using the Testmo CLI to run our tests. So let's take a look at what that might look like. Let's just make sure, so we can see in the actions area, I've set my Testmo URL. I've also set my Testmo API token. In Testmo, you can get your API token by going to your profile. And as long as you have API access from your admin, you can add any number of API keys. You can see I set up this GitHub Actions API key earlier, saved that as a secret in my GitHub Actions repository. And then let's go ahead and take a look at this action. So I ran this test. In this case, I triggered it manually, but let's take a quick look at the overview of how this ran. You can see I checked out the repository. This is all pretty standard stuff for test automation. We're just taking a quick look. We can see the Playwright browsers, and we can see that the CLI already handled all of the steps that we needed to do to run the test and report it to Testmo URL, to our Testmo instance with the Testmo URL there. It was just a few steps that we had to do to add that information to our repository here, to that YAML file, in order to get that integrated. So literally nothing more complicated than that, just adding a few lines to a YAML file, making sure that you've got Node.js. That's one of the dependencies that you'll need to run the Testmo CLI in your instance, but that's pretty widely available. We've got detailed documentation about this on our docs website as well, so you can take a look there if you have questions. But with that added to your repository, you actually don't have any other integration steps that you need to get your automation reported into Testmo. Let's just take a quick look. Just by running that test with those extra lines added to the Testmo CLI is triggered, you can see I've already got this automation starting to be reported to Testmo. So many teams have a number of different pipelines related to different areas of the application. Like you might have one automated test suite for the front end of your application. You might have another that's more related to the back end of your application, or API testing, etc. So you're most likely going to end up with a number of different sources. Those might be mapped to your different automated test suites, in addition to a number of runs, especially if you're the kind of team that has automation running nightly, or you have it automatically triggered on various different builds. You'll end up with a lot of information here, which gives you great visibility into the progress and status of your testing, including all of your automated testing. All right, so now that we've got all of our test cases that we already had imported, we've got Jira integrated, we've hooked up our test automation pipelines and GitHub Actions with Testmo. So now we're reporting our test automation. Let's look at what an actual sample test workflow might look like. I recommend teams start by adding a milestone, because a milestone really gives you the best sort of unified view of all the testing that you might do related to a specific test cycle. So let's say, for example, we've got a new release coming out, and it's going to be v 1.5. I can select what type of milestone I want this to refer to. Ultimately, this is just up to you and how you use it. You can also create your own milestones here that if you want to. In this case, we're going to say it's a release. You can also add sub milestones if you have various checkpoints along the way. So let's say you've got a major release, but then you've got the dev phase, testing phase, the like final release checks phase or something like that. You can have multiple sub milestones to be testing against. Let's say that the planned release date is the end of January, and you can add automation tags to this milestone in Testmo, so that which then you can sync with your automation in your GitHub repository or wherever your automated suites are running, so that any automation that you run with this tag v15, or just as an example, will automatically get associated with this milestone as soon as you run the automation. So that can be really helpful to have your automated tests that are related to this specific milestone sync to this milestone automatically. That's a field that you can set dynamically when you're running the test in your pipelines. So that can be super helpful. If you had any notes, like a link to a particular Jira epic or something like that, you could add that here. Any other notes about like the overall goal for the milestone. You can also link to your Jira. Let's say we had a specific epic that was going to be our Jira epic for this release. We could add that issue ID here as a reference. We won't do that for now, but you can just see that. All right, so we've got our release. Right now, this is empty, but let's go ahead and start planning some testing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's add our first run. And let's just make this a regression run. And we're going to select all of the high priority test cases in my repository. I'm going to test those to make sure they're all working. Okay, let's go ahead and add that run. Okay, so now we've got this new test run, and when we open it up, we can see it basically looks like the same outline of our test cases from a repository. So the way that you organize your test case in a repository will give you that organization for when you run your test runs as well. Basically, what we've done is we've filled those test cases only to the high priority ones, the ones that we really care about. We want to make sure are working with every release, so we can just do a quick review and make sure all of our high priority functionality is still working correctly. We're going to test that to make sure even with this new release, everything's working correctly. So basically it becomes this nice checklist. I can see an overview of what I'm going to need to test. Great. So now let's say I've got the application open in the other window. Let's go ahead and I'll just start recording how long I'm spending on this test, how long it's taking me to run this test. This is optional. You don't have to do this, but some teams really like having the ability to predict how long each test is taking, to kind of track that over time, so they have a really granular view of how much testing effort they have left before a given release or something like that. So we'll have that going. All right, let's say I went to my account creation page. I've got this on the other screen. It's working. Let's say I've got a valid username, email, password that I can put in there. Let's say that's working. And I'm able to submit the form to create the account. I get that working. I can give a quick screenshot from my other system here. I can just paste that in as some evidence that this was working. And then let's add this result. Okay, so we can basically go this way through all of our tests. If you don't need to document everything quite as specifically, you can also use the handy pass and next feature. You can reassign the test to somebody else. I don't have anybody else in my instance right now, but you can assign it to somebody else to take a look at, especially if it requires some extra review, if that's what you're saying. So for example, here we might want to, let's assign it to somebody else, and we can add a note. Something like that, so you could reassign it. And then the other thing you can do, which can be really handy, is let's say you actually discover an issue, and let's say you're in the middle of adding a result, and you realize you were able to enter the information, but it failed. So you can see the overall test result has automatically been marked failed. And let's go create an issue for the devs to look at. You can see here, I'm able to add this new issue. And I can give it a quick description. If I have more supporting documentation, I could add that here. I can, like, let's say I've got a screenshot that I want to add into the Jira issue. So let's go ahead and create that. We're going to say it's a high priority issue because that's functionality that just should be working. Now that we've created that issue, you can see it was automatically linked back to our Testmo instance. Let's add that result. So we've got a test failure here, and you can see in this test run, we've got this issue that we created. If I pop over to my Jira instance, let's go to my Jira board, and we'll go to that back office instance. You can see this bug that we created, the screenshot that I added while I was testing. I was able to submit that screenshot. And we can see that this bug was created from a Testmo test. You can see it was this test, verify user login with credentials, that failed. In Testmo, I can see that the status of this Jira issue is to do. And I can see exactly where it was that the test failed. I can see that I added that issue. I can also, from the Jira side, at any time, if I want to check what the status is from the devs, I can click the dropdown. That'll give me a preview of the issue in Jira, and I can link back over to that if I need to. What's really nice is since we created that milestone first, too, we started doing that test run. Since we were running those tests in context of the milestone, we can see that that issue that I reported to Jira is also bubbling up into our milestone. And we can get a quick at-a-glance view of the status of that issue, as well as the latest test result that we had related to that issue. So that way you can start to get a sense of the kind of visibility and traceability that Testmo gives you. Let's say, though, you want to run some testing that's not going to be quite as scripted as what we wrote out in the test case repository. And it's really going to be more exploratory in nature, or maybe more ad hoc. Like, let's say the devs just pushed a new branch and they want the QA team just to give a quick look, like what do we think of the most recent artifact or the most recent feature that they put in there. We're not ready to like fully write out test cases on it yet, but we do want to do some exploratory testing around it. So I'm going to create a new session. Sessions are the tool in Testmo that allow you to basically have an empty bucket that you can use for whatever kind of ad hoc testing that you need to do. So let's say we're adding a new feature where we're going to have users be able to receive new kinds of notifications for our billing app. This is part of our v.1.5 release. And our mission for this session is going to be to explore the new notifications functionality that dev pushed to the dev branch yesterday, see how closely it aligns with the user stories we drafted at the beginning of the sprint, any key issues we're noticing so far. So it's just a high-level description. What is it exactly that we want to work on? when we're testing this, like what's the goal for the testing. You can change, similar to the test cases, the test case templates that we saw earlier, you can change your session templates if there's a specific kind of session template that you want to create, or there's multiple ones where you have maybe some different prompts. You can change any of the naming of the fields here. So let's go ahead. I also tagged this as part of our release v.1.5. So let's go ahead and add that session. All right, so when I go into a session, the main difference between a session and the test case results is that all of the results that I'm going to be logging, or notes that I'm going to be adding as I'm going through this test session, are going to be part of this same exploratory session here. That gives me the ability to not only call out passed or failed, but I can also just make general usability notes that I want to share back with the devs. It allows me to add multiple pieces of test evidence or multiple areas of the functionality in this one same test bucket so that I can easily refer back to them, but doesn't require me to spend all the time up front to script out what I'm going to be testing. It gives me a little bit more flexibility and freedom. A lot of teams, when they're doing exploratory testing, like to set some kind of time box, like 30 minutes that you get to spend on this. So let's go ahead and look at that. A handy tool in Testmo is that you can actually also track, just like you can track how long it takes for you to run your manual, more scripted tests. You could also track how long you spent on this session. So let's say, let's say you opened the new notification menu just fine. We'll add that note. Then you'll notice the timer just resets. So, but on the total session time, that continues to continue as a total. So it's a nice, handy little feature. Let's say one of the key elements of the user story was that you're able to change the notification settings. And so if that is something that was in the user story, great, it passed. Let's say you run into an error with saving the notification settings. So you can mark that as failed. And let's just add that. So now as I'm doing this testing, you can see I'm getting this visual representation of all of the logs that I've put in for this session. I've got this sense of the total time elapsed. Part of what's nice about this too is that the session log dashboard allows you to jump right to those notes that you logged. So if you want to come back in here, let's say like you've logged a bunch of different notes and you want to come back to one of those critical failures you might have identified earlier in your session, you can just click that and jump right to it. We actually can do the same thing right from our milestone view as well. So you can see all of the notes that I logged for this session, can jump to that session to see the detailed statistics, and then if I need to, I can jump right to that particular log that I made. I can also, in the same way that I was able to push a defect into Jira for one of the failures that I logged for the manual test in my manual test run, I can do the same thing with exploratory sessions. So if I find a bug or an issue that really needs to be reported, I can report that to the development team and log and link to an issue as well. All right, so we've looked at milestones. We've talked about how you can queue up manual runs as part of your milestone. You have sessions that you can be logging as part of a given release or milestone as well, so that you can be having more flexibility to test general areas of functionality instead of having to follow a specific script. And then we also talked about automation. Once you link up your automation, you start to have automation runs that are running with that milestone tag that we talked about earlier. They'll automatically appear here. And that way you get an at-a-glance view in real time of all of the different kinds of testing that you might be doing and what kind of results you're getting from that testing. So if we look back at our demo project just to see what this might look like, if we had a bunch of tests already running, you can see This milestone view is giving you a great dashboard to see all of the different test efforts that you've got going. You can use the state field across a number of artifacts. We didn't talk about that a ton, but you can explore that on your own to indicate the progress of some of the overall testing efforts matched up with some of the actual results that you're seeing. Here we can even see that when you're using the Testmo CLI, you can even have real-time status on the progress of individual test automation runs as well, in addition to being able to then jump into the run and see all of the tests that passed, how long they took to pass, etc. So there's a lot that you can get into as you get going, but hopefully this gives you enough to kind of get a sense of the overall workflow that you might use in Testmo. Last couple things that I just want to point out. As you get into using Testmo more, you may want to take a look at our reports area. These give you some more detailed specific reports from different areas of the application. They're a bit more configurable than the built-in reporting that you've got in your base project. If you're on a business plan or enterprise plan, that could be something that you might want to look into as you're getting going. You've got more data that you're recording in Testmo. It's also worth pointing out that if you are doing a decent amount of manual testing for your application, this My Work section gives you a nice way to see which runs have tests that have been assigned to you. So once you're actually underway, you're doing the testing, that can be a really quick way to see what tests do I have assigned to me that I need to get accomplished. Same thing for sessions, if you had a session assigned to you. So that's just a helpful tip. And then finally, I just want to quickly give a note on administration in Testmo. There are a couple different administration sets of permissions. I'll just call out quickly, the site admin is the top level administration permission that gives you the ability to manage the entire Testmo instance. We also have project admins who are able to basically manage project related settings for specific projects, and then a regular user who won't have access to the admin area. When you're importing new users, you can add them one by one. That will send them an email notification to add them, but you can also, this is really helpful if you're just getting started, you can add a bunch of users with their email addresses and names all at once. You can assign them a particular user group, which is how you have permissions set. If you're on our business plan, you can also customize the default roles that you get out of the box and what permissions they have. We do have role-based access control as a foundational part of Testmo, and all users have access to that. If you're in the business or enterprise plans, you can customize this with whatever names you want. You can add custom roles. You can set custom sets of permissions. So that's good to know about. There's also a number of features for our enterprise customers. If you need single sign-on or SAML based authentication, that's available for enterprise users. You can also enforce two-factor authentication for all users, as well as access the auditing log. So hopefully that just gives you a quick overview of how you might get started with Testmo. We have a number of videos available on our YouTube page that go into more detail about any of these particular areas of the application. And you're also always welcome to contact us at contact@testmo.com if you have any specific questions. We'd love to help out in any way we can. So glad to have you as part of the Testmo community, and look forward to supporting you and your team as you get up and running with Testmo.